So we start the hour with Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
I want to start with some news that broke about 24 hours ago about Mike Turner, who was the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee. You sort of take everything you contended with in the first Trump presidency, including the first impeachment, and dealing with sensitivities around whistleblowers. You take the tradition of the Gang of Eight access to classified materials, and you take the kinds of people Trump has nominated in Tulsi Gabbard and other places. Why do you believe Mike Turner was fired?
Well, I think he didn't pass the test at Mar-a-Lago. And look, this is someone I served with on the Intelligence Committee. It was a vast improvement on Devin Nunes. But at the same time, even while he was willing to carry a lot of water for Donald Trump, particularly during that first impeachment, he wasn't willing to carry enough, apparently. And so Johnson is here doing the bidding of Donald Trump, removes Mike Turner. We already saw in some of the other choices for appointment to the Intelligence Committee that the Speaker made last session, putting people like Scott Perry on the committee, like Ronnie Jackson on the committee, not folks that we can have a lot of confidence in upholding that responsibility on that committee, that Trump has really already had his way in choosing to change the character of that committee. So I think we're seeing Donald Trump both as president-elect and in some sense as a alter ego for Speaker, exerting extraordinary influence over the House.
Why does that matter?
Well, because if the Intelligence Committee isn't willing to ask hard questions of the agencies, of the administration, we can't do our job. And because the Intelligence Committee deals in classified information, you don't have the outside external validators who are listening to the testimony, who can challenge assertions being made by the administration. So you have to do that yourselves as members of that committee. You have to be willing to push back and probe. If you have nothing but sycophants for the administration on that committee, it can't do its job. And what's more, if people are put on as partisans or that are not trustworthy on that committee, it means that foreign intelligence partners are going to be less likely to share. They're already less likely to share key information because they have some distrust of the incoming president.
Senator, I want to come back to Pam Bondi's confirmation hearing yesterday and show a little bit more of your questioning of her.
Are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you
horrible.
aware of a...
Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not looked
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has asked me
know.
to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
Senator. The president has
You know
called
what we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
the
please
crime rate
answer
in
my questions.
California right now
you
is
are aware,
through the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
Your
my,
robberies
Ms.
are
Bondi,
87% higher than the national average.
My question is this.
That's what I want to be focused on, Senator.
Do you have
Even if she's not telling the truth, why, if you're about to go lead the Department of Justice, and if you're, again, I take her at her word that she cares about crime in California and other places, why not affirm that that there's no predicate to investigate Jack Smith or Liz Cheney? I mean, that feels like a really a distant leap that she's asking, again, not Democratic senators, but the DOJ workforce to take before she's even there.
It really wasn't a hard question to answer. She could have simply said, no, I'm aware of no factual predicate. I am not a member of the Justice Department. I wouldn't have access to information. So it wouldn't be hard to answer that question. It shouldn't have been hard to answer that question. What made it difficult for her is she was terrified, I think, of contradicting Donald Trump in any way, saying anything to displease Donald Trump. And the problem with all of that is if she doesn't have the independence even before she's in that job to answer a simple question to Congress, as the questions I asked, or another question I asked her about whether she'll commit to preserving the evidence of the January 6th investigation. If she can't answer those questions for fear of Donald Trump, what will she do when she's being pressed by him? And of course, none of this is in a vacuum. It all takes place in the context of a Supreme Court decision that gave Donald Trump absolute immunity to commit crimes using the Department of Justice. So more than ever, you need an attorney general willing to say no to an unlawful or immoral request of the president. She did not demonstrate yesterday any willingness, ability to do so.
Well, there's a real parallel between your questioning of her and the clip I came in on. It's not a matter of if, but when you're asked to do something unlawful, as Jim Comey was, as Bill Barr was with the election denialism that Trump trafficked in at the end of his term. What does it say to you that in relative terms, Pam Bondi's viewed as a sure thing for confirmation?
Well, it tells us how the bar has so dramatically changed. That someone who can't even vouch for the independence of that office in any meaningful way is considered a shoo-in, and people that are so plainly disqualified from high office, like Kash Patel, would be even under consideration. Someone who has said they want to shut down the FBI headquarters and open a museum to the deep state. How is it possible that someone who is kind of internet trollish like that, someone of poor judgment, of poor character, could be considered like Kash Patel? But we are where we are. There is, I think, such fealty to Donald Trump, not just among these nominees, but among many in the Senate. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope we see some vigorous questioning, and not just from Democrats, of these nominees.
What do you do as a body if you can't make the other party care about, or even view it as a crisis, that you have a nominee to lead the department who won't pledge that the department will make prosecutorial decisions just based on the facts?
Well, it's very hard to persuade folks if they don't want to see it, or if they have their own concerns about crossing Donald Trump. It may not happen. It may not come to fruition. That is the realization of the danger that someone like Patel in particular poses, until they're the subject of scrutiny by the president. And we've seen he'll turn on people in his own party in a heartbeat, whether they're in the Senate or the House, in his own administration. In the last Trump administration, not a week seemed to go by where he wasn't throwing someone under the bus for insufficient fealty. So it may not happen. They may not recognize the danger until it confronts them personally. I would urge that we not wait till that point.
You're new to the Senate. I've never worked on Capitol Hill, but can you help me and our viewers understand how Tommy Tuberville was able to hold up very well qualified generals and appointees to the Department of Defense and the Pentagon and throughout the military? And the Democrats can't stop folks like Kash Patel, who you've mentioned twice.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure that I'm the best party to answer that question, as I'm still learning the kind of arcane rules of procedure in the Senate. But the Senate does operate very significantly on a basis of unanimous consent, in which a single member can really stop a lot of things from happening. On the positive side, it forces people to work across the aisle to get things done, sometimes to get anything done. But with these cabinet nominees, it is a majority vote. I'm not sure why the same opportunity to try to slow down what seems like inevitable confirmation of some folks who are not fit for their nominated office. I'm not sure why that is not why that's not an option here.
Some of your former colleagues in the House, folks you've worked closely with over the last 8 years, have written to outgoing Attorney General Merrick Garland about dropping the cases against Walt Nauta and Francisco de Oliveira to limit any ongoing proceedings and usher in the release of Jack Smith's second volume. Do you support that effort, and would you like to see the special counsel report into Donald Trump's mishandling of classified documents, including national defense information, made public?
I don't support that, and frankly, I didn't think the department should have dismissed the case against Donald Trump either. I think those proceedings should have been essentially postponed until he was no longer in office. I understand why that decision was made, but nonetheless, I don't think these other cases should be dismissed either. I would simply await the resolution of those cases, and then that report should be published. Now, I realize that may very well not happen. In fact, the Trump administration may make those two cases go away. But if they do, let it be on their hands that the justice process is subverted. I would not do them the favor of making that problem go away for them.
You've been the subject of threats of retribution. The Kash Patel is the nominee for FBI director. I think you're on. I think if you cross all the lists, you make all of them. Trump's, his, Bannon's, everyone who's threatening retribution. Are you doing anything to protect yourself?
Well, I'm frankly more concerned about my personal security than I am about my legal liability as a member of the January 6th committee. I'm enormously proud of the work that we've done. I think all of us feel that way. I have no concerns about that work and stand behind it. But, I think we've all seen in this environment, and I'm not alone in this, the level of personal threats has really exploded beyond, I think, anything we've seen before. That's a dangerous trend affecting people on both sides of the aisle, and that is something that we should all condemn and do our best to move away from.
Officer Fanone was on this show on January 6th talking about his mother being swatted and someone coming along and dumping feces on her property. The harassment obviously intended to send a message to her that she would, I guess the thinking goes, pass along to her son to silence him as a critic or even an eyewitness to January 6th. Is there anything Democrats can do in the minority to protect the harassment of, I guess, what in struggling democracies or autocracies you would call political dissidents?
Well, we have limited ability to do that in the minority. We can certainly call on law enforcement to make sure that law enforcement is taking every step it can to protect people. We can help make people aware of their rights. We can also put pressure on the majority to take steps to reduce the risk to witnesses, to police officers, to their families, to their own colleagues. But a lot of it is, frankly, using the bully pulpit. And I think we also have to attack the amplification of these threats, which happens online. I think a big part of the challenge that we're facing and the reason for the explosion in the volume of threats is the extraordinary amplification of vile and violent content online, and we all can play a role in trying to curb that.
I want to ask you about matters closer to home. Your district, your former district, very close to and impacted by the fires. What are you hearing from your constituents in California? And what are your questions as to how much of this was an unstoppable act of God and calamitous, tragic weather event? And how much needs to be evaluated and examined and improved upon in this sort of changing climate environment?
What I'm hearing from constituents is both heartbreaking and at the same time heartwarming. The heartbreaking aspect is all around us. People who have lost their homes, some have lost family members. They've lost all their cherished memories that were in those homes. They lost their pets. They lost their neighborhood, their church, their synagogue, their local grocery store. They are living in hotels. They are surfing on friends' couches. That is all so very heartbreaking, and the scope of it is beyond anything I've ever seen. And we are not unaccustomed to fire in Los Angeles. But at the same time, I have been really inspired by the firefighters and the risks they're taking, by their inexhaustible energy to keep up the fight, and those fires are still not out. The degree to which people who have lost everything are nonetheless very positive about their own future, their plans to rebuild. We're going to have to move with urgency on that rebuilding process. There are a lot of questions about how these fires became so severe. I think, at its very base, we had 100-mile-an-hour winds accompanied by fire. So essentially, we had a hurricane and fire instead of a hurricane and rain. That is beyond anybody's capacity to deal with. At the same time, some of those fires might have been preventable. We have to find out, and some of the response could be improved. We have to be willing to ask the tough questions. I think we ought to have an independent commission to look at everything from start to finish, to essentially get to the ground truth of this. But I think we also need to think big picture about the impacts of climate change, about the increasing prevalence of these mega fires, and what that means about urban planning and resilience, and how we need to think about living differently.
Senator Adam Schiff, in the middle of all sorts of cross currents up there, thank you for taking the time to start us off today. It's nice to see you. Stay safe.
Thank you.